bike shop, or is it a bike museum, or a little bit of both? Today we are here in Long Beach, California to do a shop visit over at the Bicycle Stand. Let's go check it out. So we're here with Evan from the Bicycle Stand. What is this magical place? Is it like a bike shop or a bike museum?
That's a good question. We ask ourselves that a lot these days. This is a place that we created to sort of capture some of these obviously the vintage spirit of cycling. We do vintage, we do new, we do restoration, we do sales, we do general repair here, a little bit of everything. And without one of those quotients, we probably wouldn't be here. So it has to be a little bit of everything. I think most of us have some sort of affinity towards older stuff, but you know, all of myself and my guys that work here ride everything from, you know, modern track bikes, road bikes, gravel bikes to classic steel, you know, and you know, there's never too many bikes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've been wandering around, and there's just so much eye candy, from like classic road bikes to 90s mountain bikes. Want to walk us through and just point out some interesting bikes?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this room right here represents kind of our sort of like more civilian offerings. So bikes that are ready to live a second life, whether you're looking for like, you know, sort of a fun runabout hybrid, you know, that's kind of like ready to go gravel, ready to go.
Say ATB.
ATB, right? Exactly. And like, really, this is kind of what we try to get most people on: 700C, a little bit bigger tires,
right,
maybe an upright bar, just like a fun, like slamming hybrid, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
The vintage stuff is cool, but when you come in here, we want you to specifically be asking for a vintage road bike. Otherwise, we're probably not going to recommend it.
Okay.
Because like sense. Generally speaking, like that is a very like, you either want that or you don't.
Right.
Pretty aggressive. A lot of weight over the front end. You know, people love the silhouette, but when you put them on it for the first time, if they're not used to it, you know, they find out really quickly how much that asks of their body and their, you know, their body positioning, so to speak. And then, yeah, the mountain bikes, you know, not to say we started with this, but this is something that's obviously kind of like had sort of a resurgence recently, and like they're super fun. It kind of gives us that blast from the past sort of, you know, childhood feeling if you grew up in the 90s, you know, so we offer those to be bought, tweaked, and built up in, you know, sort of whatever way you might be interested in.
Yeah. Can you tell me about this one?
Yeah, so this is actually a Carlton, like a pre-Raleigh Carlton. So, you know, Carlton was its own brand, you know, I believe all the way into the early 60s. There's probably people out there in the comments that could tell me. This bike predates Raleigh ownership. So this bike has these chrome lugs. It was made in the Carlton factory, which later produced the higher end Raleighs, like the Pros and the Internationals and such. This pinstriping and lug lining is all original. This bike was like preserved, super clean in someone's garage for $750 for the cost of a new, you know, city bike.
Right.
You can have something that's, you know, sort of the real thing.
It just keeps getting better and better. So, hey there, everybody. If you guys have been enjoying this video, please consider supporting the channel by joining us on Patreon. That's how we are able to do these shop visits, do the travel, make these videos without any sponsors. If that's too much commitment, consider picking up some stickers from the store. Let's get back into that video.
Everything's pretty much for sale. You know, if a lot of these bikes are here that are untouched, unrestored, because some of the bikes are more desirable that way. Some of the bikes in the brick room we have gone through and kind of like changed out, you know, done a tune-up or like a light refurbishing. We try to keep them as original as possible, wait for the right client to come in, and then refurbish based on their needs.
Yeah.
You know, so like some of these bikes, they're all for sale, but we pretty much haven't touched them because we figure the client's going to come in and say, oh, dude, I've been looking for that purple Day-Rosa in a 57. That's the one, but I want to do it with full super record and tubular tires or whatever, or put clinchers on it or whatever. So we'll build it to them.
Tell me about the track bikes on the wall.
So these, you know, Pursuit bikes, we work with a couple different collectors, and we try to have like a rotating gallery. One of the things as I grow older and I have less time to ride and, you know, ride competitively, one of the things that comes to light is the fact that, like, I think a lot of us are just drawn to some of these bicycles based on sort of design, right? And the fact that they're they're tactile works of art. They're like pieces of art that people have put so much time and effort into. And then not only can you put them up on the wall and look at them, if you feel brave enough, you can you know, bring them down, stand over them, you know, take them out for a spin and kind of like wake yourself up a little bit. And like there's very few things in the world that offer that dynamic of a visual involvement and then that sort of tactile involvement. And that's part of the reason this shop exists, is like trying to figure out like aesthetically, geometry, quality, symmetry, like who's doing what. Myself, our staff, we created this place to try to quantify those things, right? And to take note of like how those things came to be and who was involved in what manner.
Do you reach out to collectors, or are they finding you to have bikes on exhibit?
They find us, luckily. So like the guy that has these two bikes on display, runs an Instagram page called Vintage Space. I highly recommend everybody go and check that out. Beautiful bikes on his Instagram. But you know, he's the first one to come to us and say, hey, aside from just photographing these bikes and putting them online, they're generally under blankets in a spare bedroom.
Right.
Like, no one's getting any like positive energy out of these things in that way. He's like, I would love to like have these on the wall, like one or two at a time, and rotate these things out, so to share these, you know, sort of works of art with other people. And I think that like right there is something that is a great part of our community. Right. You know, just the fact that people are reaching out to us and saying, hey, how can I share my passion with other people? I don't need anything back out of it, you know?
What else we got?
Well, we got a couple funky, aggressive track bikes on the wall. Some frame sets, you know, we got our Jan Ullrich Team Telecom versus Lance Armstrong. You know, we have some 1930s sort of French, this is an English Hetchins that we're gonna one day restore. You know, various just different generations we tried to get our hands on and bring into the shop to understand it, figure out how it rides, like figure out when, you know, certain things were introduced. So like this bike has, you know, 650B wheel size, right? So it's like, it's from like, you know, the early 50s. So like, when did low trail come into play? When did 650B come into play? How does it ride on a steel bike with steel handlebars, with steel seat posts and steel stem? Like a lot of this stuff is uniquely different. And I think, again, that's part of the reason why we exist, is a lot of our customers are looking for something that's like uniquely different in its riding experience. You go to different generations, the wheelbase changes, the head tube angle changes, the fork changes, you know, wheel size changes, you know, obviously driveline changes. All those things are eye-opening, right? They're not just like this slight difference. It's like, oh, wow, like love it or hate it, it's noticeably different, right? Generally speaking, it just adds depth to our experience when a customer comes in and says, hey, I have this bike, I do want to ride it. How should I build it, or what can I do to make it more rideable? We say, oh, you know what, we had this 1930s bike similar, and you know, we found that blah 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 blah. You know, they trust us.
So do you guys have like an armory of vintage parts to work with older bikes, or how do you source parts for the various quote-unquote standards?
Totally. So, you know, aside from just selling stuff, like there's bikes that are hung from the rafters, and this is kind of like I call it our farm. Basically what this is these are bikes that could be for sale, and we've deemed them sort of good parts bikes, and so we hang them in the rafters. So we wind up pulling these bikes down, taking parts off. We're not super big on like buying bikes, taking them apart, selling the stuff individually. We could probably make a lot more money that way, but like that's kind of like not the goal here, right? The goal here is to complete bikes and to bring them back together. So a lot of these bikes exist, so certain parts can be taken off and people's ideas and builds can be put back together. I wish it was more organized, but you know, generally speaking, we have like drawers of used components, right? So when people come in and say, oh, do you have Sturmey Archer 3-speed stuff? And we say, okay, yeah, we have some Sturmey Archer 3-speed stuff.
What's the most like esoteric part that you guys have?
Let's go back out here. Esoteric. you know, like the Karima new old stock brake pads, you know, the Look Ergo stem, you know, and this is stuff that like, if I put it up on eBay, it would sell pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't know, but then you'll never see it again, you know, and it's gone, and it's just fun, you know. We try to keep a good, you know, we have a good, with the velodrome coming by, it's like we have a good like amount of guys coming in that have older track bikes or are looking to pass on their track stuff. And it's just super cool. It just kind of keeps the process going. You know, so a lot of bikes come to us from eBay and they need, you know, pedals or bottom brackets or derailleurs and, you know, stems, older saddles, crank sets, you know, and they're all kind of in there. Half the time we have what they want, the other half the time we miss the mark and we have to order off eBay anyway.
Yeah.
On the vintage stuff.
Yeah. Tell me about this bike.
So that bike is a bike that walked in our front door. It was stripped in the manner that you see it. Guy came in, said, "Hey, I have a couple bikes. Do you want to take a look at them?" And sure, yeah. And you know, he brought us a Mozzie Grand Criterium and an Alex Singer, you know, touring bike. And it was already stripped. The cool thing about this particular bike is that they're not investment cast lugs. They're all handmade lugs. You know, the lugs were fillet brazed, oversized, and then, you know, and then they were created instead of cast. And you can see that because the guy stripped the paint off of it. So when you go up to that bike closely, you can see all that handiwork and that finesse with the files and just the quality and craftsmanship that particular bike has and holds, and I don't think I'll ever change it just because it's like kind of such a fun showpiece in terms of like why this bike is different from, say, like this Geos or you know, this Trek is, you know, most of those I believe are investment cast lug. This particular bike led me to start collecting Alex Singers, like try to find them.
Right.
And you know, gold.
How's that hunt been?
Yeah, here, check it out. You know, this is it's you know, it's rare that you come across something like that, but it's like, you know, to find a Rene Erst that's basically been cast aside. You know, now the question is, do we restore it, right? Do we repaint it? Do we leave it original and, you know, and resell it? Like, do we keep it and put it on the wall? Like,
so what was the story behind how you acquired this one?
Same deal. Guy comes in and says, "Hey, you know, like I'm working on an estate sale.
Yeah.
This is chaff. This is something I couldn't sell."
Right. Interesting.
And you go, "Wait a minute. No, come
like,
on. Are you kidding me?"
I guess I'll take it.
Yeah. No. You know, the rarity and stuff like that is something that, you know, that's part of the excitement about like the part of the cycling that we're involved in, is that there are Easter eggs out there.
Yeah.
You know, you don't find those Easter eggs in every bike shop, and you know, I think that's really key to kind of like any new bike shop. You really want to kind of like find something that's different about yourself and really run with that, right? This bike is something that we painted, and it's actually it's sort of that chromo, and so that bike is actually getting all these parts that were all super high polished. So everything went out and gets ultra high polished. We're actually going to wind up doing some color inlays there.
Oh, that's cool.
So that bike is going to get, you know, the full treatment there. All the pantographing and stuff. This Bianchi here, that's not like a Bianchi Eroica bike. That's a legitimate 1959 Bianchi that's been restored. That was kind of a pet project between Joe Bell and our shop. He painted that frame, and that bike actually wound up going to the Marconi Museum for a Bianchi sales event. And it was presented in front of like Ferraris and all sorts of fun, cool stuff, and all the Bianchi bigwigs and stuff were there and saw it. And that was super cool. This Hetchens, you know, late '50s Hetchens with the Sturmey Archer 3-speed and the the spindly cranks and the super ornate lugs and you know, sort of slack. Look at that head tube.
If someone came in and had the vintage bike and said, hey, you know what? I want to put SRAM Access on it. There's a little part of you, it happens.
Absolutely.
Do you die inside just a little bit?
If it's,
I would die inside.
Right. If it's well thought out,
Yeah.
and it's sort of well engineered, and it maybe gives someone an advantage that might be struggling otherwise.
Yeah.
Sure, like,
Yeah.
okay, go for it. If you've thought it through and you've
Yeah.
determined that usage is defined as a need, then
Yeah.
more power to you, you know? We're not here to tell you what's right or what's wrong. I think that's something after 10 years of doing this, we get so many rigid outlines on the vintage stuff and on the steel stuff. In terms of just like, okay, here's this catalog picture of the Schwinn Paramount, and I
Right.
bought this frame on eBay, and it's the one that I imagined in the bike shop when I was when I was 10 years old.
Right.
Build it up exactly to my mind,
Right.
you know, like, and like it's so fun, like that Kolner, this funky purple Kolner over there.
Yeah.
You know, the customer was just like, carte blanche.
Right.
Just do
That's
whatever
cool.
you want. You know, it doesn't have to adhere to any paradigm. It doesn't have to be period correct. In fact, I don't want it to be period
Right.
correct. I want it to be weird. And
Right.
I own so many perfectly correct bikes. I
Right.
want something that's flashy and funky and
Yeah.
you know, and like, oh my gosh, it's like such a nice dip in a cool pool. You know, like it
Yeah.
feels so good to have someone come in and just be like, I'm tired of the norm. Let's do something cool. So in that case, all you wireless, one by,
Yeah.
skinny tube guys, more power to you.
If you guys are in Long Beach and you want to check out and buy some cool vintage bikes or even some new bikes, definitely stop by the bicycle stand, and thank you, Evan, for the tour.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Super fun to see you guys back in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As always, everybody, keep the supple side down.